My experience with the Suikoden series really isn't going to be as magnificent as my fellow YouTube creators that have taken part in the summer Suikoden probably have. I started off by watching my friend play the first game when I was younger, a staple of our Blockbuster video weekends, because at the time, I really wasn't into RPGs. This choice of mine would of course change when I played everyone's favorite This Got Me Into RPGs title, Final Fantasy VII. Now, while I do enjoy the adventures of Cloud and Company, curiosity got the best of me, and I wanted to see what else this genre had to offer. Now, I did play a little of both Suikoden 1 and 2 back during the PlayStation days, and even dabbled with the PS2 entries, but I never really gave them the time they deserved. Hell, it was only last year when I beat Part 1. But I did keep up with the series in hopes of finally experiencing it all. There was one title I was incredibly weary of for various reasons, the Nintendo DS spin-off, Suikoden Tierkreis. Like most people, when you hear the word spin-off, a feeling of dread comes over you, mostly due to the fact that you're entering unfamiliar territory. Characters and stories you've been following have nothing to do with it, staple comforts are thrown out of the window, that sort of thing. On top of that, Tierkreis was released on the DS, a handheld that, when it came to certain beloved RPG series, tended to be handled quite clumsily. See Lunar Dragon Song as an example. But I figured, what harm could there really be? It's handled by Konami, maybe they broke the mold and delivered a great example of RPGs on the go. The answer I discovered is yes, but no, and not in the way you expected or may even wanted. In terms of the story of Tierkreis, there is some familiarity between it and the main series. You have the 108 Stars of Destiny, sort of. The power of the 27 True Runes, sort of. And a country at war with an evil empire. Or in this case, the mysterious organization known as the Order of the One True Way. Their goal is to force their beliefs of a world that is predetermined. That is, your life, what your job is, who you'll marry and have kids with, and how you die are already decided. But of course, it wouldn't be a JRPG if this group didn't have a true evil motive. The Order's true goal is to summon a being known as the One King, who wields the power of the Chronicles, objects that contain the memories of different parallel worlds, so he can bring their dream to life. And that's the big gimmick of this game. Tierkreis takes place in the same timeline as the main games, but in a parallel world, as there's basically a Suikoden multiverse, something that has been hidden in the games before. It's an alright enough concept, mostly to keep the original continuity safe while they can experiment with other ideas. Back to the plot, you control a young man and his friends who live in a small village on the outskirts who, after coming in contact with one of the Chronicles, receives great power and has visions of a major fight between the Order and a somewhat mysterious-looking hero and his army. With this new power and purpose, our new hero must stop the Order from trying to take over all worlds and rule under their law. I actually found it kind of hard to connect with this plot, especially coming from the other Suikodens where, being a story about war and the loss and hardships it can cause, instead felt like it was written by someone who's never even touched a Suikoden game. Granted, being a spin-off, I don't expect it to feel the same as its main counterparts, but the big focus on dimension hopping and alternate realities, as well as its emphasis on being more lighthearted, felt like if Nickelodeon was making a Suikoden, or Snikoden, if you will. It just feels off from what made the series so great. Even though there is a fair amount of those emotional moments that do harken back to the main series, they just didn't grip me like it did when a certain character from Part 1 that I started to love suddenly died. And if you've played Part 1, you truly know who I'm talking about. Even as I progressed through the game to see if some amazing twist was going to happen, or if the ending would make up for it all, it didn't happen for me. It just didn't have that big of an impact. On top of that, the characters didn't give off any kind of emotional attachment for me. As much as I tried to, I just couldn't care about them and their backstories. Plus, the main character has one of the most overused catchphrases ever. You don't know till you try. Hell, I think everyone uses that one.
Hey, you never know till you try.
Sadly, this feeling slightly leaks into the gameplay. Tierkreis does have some gameplay mechanics brought over from the PlayStation games, with a few changes, more than likely due to making it more accessible for the handheld. Traversing the map is now done by going from area to area on a giant map, similar to Final Fantasy Tactics, minus the random battle spots, with town areas and field areas. towns are now chopped up into sections to visit, like the inn, vendor, and of course places of interest, while traversing the field and dungeon areas is what you'd expect from a JRPG, mostly to fight enemies and get to the next area. Since we're on the subject of fighting, the combat in Tierkreis is that familiar Suikoden style, with only 4 party members allowed to fight as opposed to the usual 6, as well as a support character you can have join that will give you a particular buff, like healing a party member after each turn. Standard attacks, team attacks, and the rune magic, marks of the stars, all return. Though now, instead of your magic having set charges, it now just uses a standard MP meter. On top of that, characters are now pre-equipped with marks after obtaining a chronicle that, instead of leveling up, you just now earn new spells as you acquire more chronicles, which can be customized to your liking. Plus, being a DS game, the dual screens are being put to good use, showing character info on the top and menus on the bottom. What brought the combat down for me though is that you and your party can feel so overpowered so quickly that, if you want, you could just auto-attack every turn and basically win, with some exceptions where strategy is needed. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to auto-attack through easy fights with weak enemies, but the fact that you're gaining all these powers and abilities but can just breeze through almost all fights with no real problems made me feel really disheartened. It's because of this I found myself starting to get bored just auto-attacking everything, but becoming ecstatic when a boss came along, especially on the field maps. You see, this game has an in-game seasonal calendar that progresses when you move across the map. This affects not only recruiting members for your army, but increases chances of fighting a boss randomly in a dungeon or field, which is really nice, but challenging. There are also instances where you fight creatures from other worlds called renegades, that can only be damaged by characters from other worlds, so thankfully it's not all going to be automatic. After combat, you receive your usual experience points, but you don't get any money. Instead, you get materials, which leads into another interesting idea of this game: trading. Each town has a trade goods vendor that you can buy and sell goods from, with some goods fetching higher prices in different towns, like ore being worth nothing in a mining town, but thousands in a city by the ocean. Because of this, you'll be rolling in so much pot you won't know what to do with it. Well, actually you will. In previous Suikodens, you could buy not only items for healing and the like, but you were able to sharpen and strengthen your weapons, buy armor, and equip runes. Fortunately, or unfortunately depending on your preference, you no longer sharpen weapons. Instead, you just purchase different types for your soldiers, like swords, spears, bows, claws, and staves, which actually show on your character, which is pretty cool. You do eventually get a castle that acts as home base for you and the Stars of Destiny. Star Bearers, something each Suikoden has been known to have, and that's where the missions will come in. Similar to a tactical RPG, you have missions, both main and secondary, that you complete to earn money, items, recruits, and of course progress the story. I feel that this mechanic was chosen to complement being on a portable device, and it actually works. Although if you were a fan of the huge army battles or the one-on-one duels like the previous stuff, you'll be sad to know that they don't make an appearance here. Visually, Tierkreis is a mixed bag. The backgrounds are beautiful and really match the tone the series has gone for over the years. The characters, while looking fantastic in the game's many cutscenes and text portraits, have decent enough polygon models for the time, although there were other RPGs that had more impressive DS graphics. I will say though that the enemy designs are pretty good, especially the bosses. One thing I absolutely enjoy though is the game's music. Suikoden had some amazing compositions in its history, and I'm happy to say that the tradition continues with some great songs complementing the gameplay, thanks in part to a great team of composers, one of which was Masuharu Iwata, who's composed music for some big titles like the Ogre Battle series and even Final Fantasy Tactics. I sadly can't say the same for the voice acting, as it's very hit and miss, especially with the main character. It sounds like he has a gun to his head or something, so he's reading his lines at a breakneck pace. However, this could actually be due to capturing the footage via emulation. I'm not entirely sure.
This is about as fish as a fish pie with extra fish on the side.
Either way, there are some good performances here, but you'll probably just end up reading the text first and skipping the voices anyway. After playing all the way to the end of Suikoden Tierkreis, it's a tough game to recommend, putting me in the middle of the road. On one hand, it's a pretty decent RPG on the go, with fun mechanics, even if you might get bored just auto-attacking everything. but as an entry in the Suikoden series, it's not as good. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against dimension hopping and stories about infinite universes, but to me anyway, the story and its characters feels a bit more happy-go-lucky than the bigger entries I've played, and that's what attracted me to those games. This big epic tale of love, loss, and the casualties of war, and one hero bringing together those chosen by destiny to end it. As I said earlier, there are some of those elements present here, but it doesn't feel like the main focus. If anything, Tierkreis would have probably been better off as an anime than a game. Regardless of how I feel though, I still say try Suikoden Tierkreis, whether you're new to the series or a fan of the main games, and see if this game changes your opinion of the word spin-off. Hell, it might up being the best one you've ever played, unless you haven't played Part 2. If not, you need to get on that ASAP. Now, as far as the US goes, this was the end of the road for this underrated saga. However, in Japan, 2012 would be the year that we would search for the Stars of Destiny one last time. But is it truly a fitting finale?